A few months had passed since the terrifying events at Ijeoma's house. The deliverance had brought peace, and everyone had tried to return to their normal lives. Ijeoma was back at school. Her mother, Chinwe, had regained her strength, and the Uzoamaka had started attending church regularly. Things seemed calm, at least on the surface, but deep down, Ijeoma felt an unsettling presence that refused to leave her mind. She hadn't spoken about it to anyone, not even to Uzoamaka, her closest friend. The nightmares, the dark figures lurking at the edge of her dreams, they had become too familiar. Every night, Ijeoma would wake up, drenched in sweat, her heart racing. She didn't understand why the dark force seemed to still have a hold on her. It was as if it was waiting for something. One night, while sitting alone in her room, Ijeoma felt a cold breeze sweep through, even though the windows were shut. She froze, fear creeping into her veins. Her eyes darted around the room, and that's when she saw it. A shadow in the corner, shaped like a person, but more twisted and unnatural. Who are you?" Ijeoma stammered, trying to sound brave, though her voice betrayed her fear. The shadow didn't speak, but it moved closer, looming over her like a storm cloud ready to burst. In that moment, Ijeoma felt paralyzed. Her throat tightened, and she could barely breathe. Suddenly, a soft voice whispered in her ear, "I'm never leaving." Ijeoma screamed, clutching her chest. She bolted out of the room and ran to her mother, Chinwe, who was in the living room, reading her Bible. "Mom, it's happening again," Ijeoma cried, trembling. "I think it's back. It never left me." Chinwe's face turned pale. She had prayed day and night that the evil had been cast out for good. But now, seeing the fear in her daughter's eyes, she realized something had gone terribly wrong. "We need to go back to the church," Chinwe said firmly. "We need the pastor. He'll know what to do." The pastor, Atatasari, Pastor Nkem. An older man with a gentle but firm demeanor, listened carefully as Ijeoma recounted the shadow's visit. His brow furrowed in concern. "I had a feeling this wasn't over," Pastor Nkem said after a long silence. "The spirit that attacked you might have left temporarily, but if it wasn't fully cast out, it could return. We have to act quickly." He instructed Ijeoma, her mother, and the housemaid to stay in the church that night. He would gather the prayer warriors again for another deliverance, but this time they needed to be prepared for something more dangerous. That night, the church was dimly lit, with only the flickering candles providing light. Ijeoma sat in the front pew, nervously tapping her foot. Her mother sat beside her, praying quietly. The prayer warriors and Pastor Nkem gathered around, holding hands, ready for the battle ahead. As they began to pray, the air grew thick, almost suffocating. The temperature in the room dropped, and the same cold breeze from Ijeoma's room swept through the church. It was here. Suddenly, Ijeoma felt a sharp pain in her chest. She gasped, clutching at her shirt, her face contorting in pain. Pastor Nkem's voice grew louder, commanding the spirit to leave. But then, to everyone's horror, Ijeoma stood up, her eyes rolling back in her head. Her body jerked unnaturally, and she let out a low, guttural laugh that echoed through the church. The sound didn't belong to her. It was the spirit. The prayer warriors shouted louder, their voices desperate as they commanded the spirit to leave Ijeoma's body. But instead of retreating, the spirit fought back. Ijeoma's body convulsed, and she let out an ear-piercing scream. The lights in the church flickered, and for a moment it felt as though the entire building was shaking. Chinwe rushed to her daughter, but Pastor Nkem held her back. "No, you can't touch her right now. It's too dangerous." The spirit wasn't going to leave without a fight. It had attached itself too deeply to Ijeoma, feeding on something that had never been resolved. Suddenly, through the chaos, Ijeoma began speaking in a voice that was not her own. "You fools think you can save her," the voice taunted. "She is mine, and none of you can change that." Pastor Nkem stepped forward, holding his Bible high. "In the name of Jesus, I command you to leave this child," he shouted. For a moment, there was silence. Ijeoma's body slumped, and it seemed as though the spirit was weakening. But just as the prayer warriors began to relax, Ijeoma's eyes flew open again, this time glowing an unnatural fiery red. A deep, menacing voice came from her lips. "I'm not alone." At that moment, the church door creaked open, and everyone turned to see a figure standing in the doorway. It was a woman, shrouded in a dark cloak, her face hidden by shadows. "No," Chinwe whispered, her eyes widening in recognition. "It can't be." It was Ijeoma's stepmother, Adaora. Though paralyzed since the deliverance months ago, Adaora now stood tall, her eyes gleaming with a malicious light. She walked slowly into the church, the sound of her footsteps echoing against the stone walls. Pastor Nkem stepped back, shocked. How is this possible?" Adaora smiled cruelly. "You didn't think I was just going to let you take her, did you?" Her voice dripped with venom. "You cast the spirit out of her, but you never destroyed it. It found a new host, me." Adaora's body began to contort, her limbs twisting in unnatural ways, just as Ijeoma's had before. She let out a laugh that chilled everyone to the bone. "And now I'm stronger than ever." Ijeoma, still possessed, staggered towards her stepmother, their eyes locking. "Together, we are unstoppable," they said in unison. The prayer warriors stood frozen, unsure of how to proceed. Pastor Nkem, his face pale, gripped his Bible tighter. This was beyond anything he had dealt with before. Chinwe fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "God, help us," she whispered. "Please, save my daughter." The church was plunged into chaos as Ijeoma and Adaora began to chant in a strange guttural language. Dark clouds formed inside the church, swirling around them, creating a vortex of energy. The candles blew out, leaving only the faint glow from the red eyes of the two possessed women. Pastor Nkem raised his hands and called for the prayer warriors to form a circle. "Do not lose faith," he commanded. "We will fight this together. God is with us." The prayer warriors joined hands and began to pray loudly, their voices blending into one powerful chant. But as their prayers grew stronger, so did the dark energy swirling around Ijeoma and Adaora. The ground beneath the two women started to crack, as though something was trying to rise from below. Ijeoma's body jerked violently, and Adaora's laughter echoed through the church. "You think your prayers can stop us?" Adaora sneered. "You are too late." Pastor Nkem stepped forward, holding his Bible tightly in one hand and a cross in the other. "In the name of Jesus, I command you to leave," he shouted, his voice booming through the church. Adaora and Ijeoma shrieked in unison, their bodies convulsing as the power of the prayers began to take effect. The dark clouds around them flickered, as though they were being pulled apart. For a moment, it seemed like the spirit was weakening. Ijeoma's body slumped slightly, and Adaora's glowing red eyes dimmed. But then, out of nowhere, a powerful force slammed into Pastor Nkem, knocking him to the ground. His Bible flew out of his hands, landing several feet away. "No!" Chinwe screamed, rushing towards the fallen pastor. But before she could reach him, Adaora raised her hand, and an invisible force threw Chinwe backward, slamming her against the church wall. "Mom!" Ijeoma's voice cried out from within the spirit's grip, a brief moment of her consciousness breaking through the possession. But it was quickly silenced as the dark force tightened its hold on her. Pastor Nkem struggled to his feet, his face pale but determined. "We will not give up," he said, his voice firm. He reached for his Bible, and as his fingers touched its cover, a blinding light erupted from it, filling the church. The light was so bright that it forced everyone to shield their eyes. Adaora and Ijeoma screamed, their voices filled with pain as the light enveloped them, pushing back the dark clouds and shaking the very foundation of the church. Pastor Nkem shouted verses from the Bible, his voice rising above the chaos. Each word was like a hammer striking at the chains binding Ijeoma. Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." His voice rang clear and powerful, and with each declaration, the light grew brighter, casting shadows into the corners of the church. Ijeoma's body jerked violently, as if an internal battle raged within her. "Help me." "Mom," she cried, her voice breaking through the fog of possession. "I can't fight it alone." Chinwe, struggling to regain her footing, shouted back, "Ijeoma, we're here. Fight. You're stronger than this darkness." As if fueled by her mother's words, Ijeoma's form began to glow with the same light emanating from Pastor Nkem. The spirit within her howled in rage, trying to resist the powerful forces at play. Adaora, her eyes narrowing with anger, reached out toward her stepdaughter. "You are nothing without me. I will take you back." "No," Ijeoma screamed, her voice now a mixture of desperation and defiance. "You don't own me." With newfound strength, Ijeoma fought against the grip of the spirit, her body glowing fiercely. The shadows around her twisted and writhed, and the sound of cracking wood echoed as the church seemed to shake under the weight of the struggle. Pastor Nkem continued to chant, his voice steady. "You are a child of God. You will not be taken. In the name of Jesus, I command you to leave her." Suddenly, Ijeoma fell to her knees, her hands gripping her head as if trying to tear the spirit out. "Get out of me. You are not welcome here," she shouted, the force of her will echoing through the church. The dark figure of Adaora lunged forward, trying to regain control. "I will destroy all of you," she shrieked, her voice booming as the darkness swirled around her, trying to pull Ijeoma back in. But Ijeoma, summoning every ounce of her strength, pushed against the force. "No, I am free. I will not be your puppet anymore." In that moment, a surge of light exploded from Ijeoma's body, creating a barrier between her and Adaora. The light pushed back the shadows, illuminating the entire church and sending tremors through the air. The prayer warriors, revitalized by Ijeoma's bravery, raised their voices even higher, creating a chorus of faith that filled the room. "We declare victory in the name of Jesus." With their combined faith, the light intensified, and the shadows surrounding Adaora and Ijeoma began to dissipate. The dark figure howled in rage, twisting and turning in an attempt to escape the radiant power. "You think you can win?" Adaora screamed, her voice echoing eerily through the church. "This is just the beginning." But as the light grew, so did Ijeoma's determination. "You're wrong. This ends now." With a final scream of defiance, Ijeoma raised her hands, and a powerful wave of light erupted from her, forcing the shadows back and engulfing Adaora. "No!" Adaora cried as the light consumed her, her form disintegrating into nothingness, leaving behind only a wisp of smoke that quickly faded away. The dark clouds vanished, the air cleared, and silence fell over the church. Ijeoma collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, her body shaking from the exertion. Chinwe rushed to her side, wrapping her arms around her daughter. "You did it, my child. You are free." Tears of joy streamed down her face as she held Ijeoma close, feeling the warmth of her daughter's body against hers. Pastor Nkem, panting but triumphant, approached them. "You were incredibly brave, Ijeoma. Your faith and strength saved you." Ijeoma looked up, still trembling. "But what if it comes back?" she asked, her voice shaky. "What if there are more like it?" "Then we will be ready," Pastor Nkem assured her. "We will pray and stand together. You are not alone in this fight." In the days that followed, Ijeoma and her mother felt a profound sense of relief. They attended church every Sunday, surrounding themselves with prayer and community. Ijeoma began to share her story with others, encouraging them to be vigilant against the darkness that lurked in the shadows. As the weeks passed, she found strength in her newfound purpose. Ijeoma decided to start a youth group at her school, where she could talk to others about the importance of faith, friendship, and the power of listening. She wanted to create a safe space for those who felt lost or alone, just as she had once felt. Uzoamaka stood by her side, helping organize events and reach out to their classmates. The two friends became pillars of strength for one another, and their bond grew deeper as they faced the challenges of high school life together. However, as much as Ijeoma tried to put the past behind her, the haunting memories of the shadow and her stepmother lingered. Late at night, she still woke up in cold sweats, the echoes of that terrifying presence invading her dreams. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Ijeoma lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about her stepmother and the darkness that had once threatened to consume her. Was it really gone, or had it merely retreated to wait for another opportunity? Weeks turned into months, and as the seasons changed, Ijeoma became more involved in her community. She organized prayer meetings and outreach programs, but with each event, she felt an unseen shadow watching from the edges. One night, after a successful youth event, Ijeoma and Uzoamaka walked home together. The streets were quiet, illuminated only by the flickering streetlights. Ijeoma felt a chill run down her spine, as if the air had grown heavier. "Are you okay?" Uzoamaka asked, noticing her friend's unease. "I'm fine," Ijeoma replied, forcing a smile, but deep down she knew she wasn't. The sense of dread was becoming harder to ignore. As they neared Ijeoma's home, she heard a whisper, so faint that she almost dismissed it. "I'm still here." Ijeoma stopped in her tracks, her heart racing. "Did you hear that?" she asked Uzoamaka, who shook her head. "Hear what?" "It was nothing," Ijeoma said quickly, brushing it off. But the feeling of being watched grew stronger. That night, as Ijeoma lay in bed, the whispers continued, growing louder and more insistent. "You can't escape me, Ijeoma, I will return." She squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself to block out the sound. "Leave me alone," she shouted, but the darkness only laughed, echoing in the corners of her mind. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers continued to torment her. Ijeoma decided it was time to confront her fears. She reached out to Pastor Nkem, seeking his guidance. "Pastor, I think there's something still lingering. I can feel it," she confessed during their meeting at the church. Pastor Nkem nodded, his expression serious. "We need to pray together, Ijeoma. We will seek God's guidance and protection." That evening they gathered in the church, the air thick with tension. Pastor Nkem led a prayer session, his voice steady as he called upon divine protection for Ijeoma. As they prayed, a strong wind rushed through the church, rattling the windows. Ijeoma felt a surge of energy, as though the darkness was trying to break through. "Stay strong," Pastor Nkem shouted over the howling wind. "Your faith is your shield." Suddenly, the whispers transformed into screams, piercing through the air. "You cannot keep me away," the voice roared, echoing off the church walls. In that moment, Ijeoma felt something shift within her. She took a deep breath, focusing on the light that had once filled her. "I will not be afraid. I am free," she proclaimed, her voice resonating with determination. The air around them crackled with energy as the spirit fought back against the light. "You think you are free? I am stronger than you can imagine." Pastor Nkem continued to pray fervently, urging Ijeoma to channel her strength. "Claim your freedom, Ijeoma. Speak with conviction." With every ounce of her will, Ijeoma shouted, "I refuse to be your vessel. You have no power over me." The screams intensified, echoing like thunder in the church, but Ijeoma stood firm. "In the name of Jesus, I command you to leave." The darkness surged forward, swirling around her like a tempest, but Ijeoma met it with her own light, clashing in a breathtaking battle of wills. In a final explosion of energy, the church shook violently, and then silence. Ijeoma collapsed to her knees, panting heavily. Pastor Nkem reached for her, concern etched on his face. "Ijeoma, are you okay?" But as Ijeoma remained on the floor, her eyes wide open but unseeing, the church felt eerily quiet, as if time had momentarily stopped. Pastor Nkem knelt beside her, worry etched on his brow. "Ijeoma, can you hear me?" he asked, gently shaking her shoulders. After a moment that felt like an eternity, Ijeoma blinked rapidly, finally focusing on the pastor's concerned face. I think I did it," she gasped, her voice trembling. "I think I pushed it away." "You did well," Pastor Nkem replied, relief flooding his features. "But we must stay vigilant. This battle is far from over." Ijeoma nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle in her heart. She could still sense the remnants of the darkness lurking just out of sight, ready to strike again. The experience had left her shaken, but she was determined not to let it defeat her. In the days following her confrontation with the darkness, Ijeoma focused on rebuilding her strength. She attended church services and led discussions with the youth group about faith and resilience. Each meeting became a refuge where she shared her journey and encouraged others to stand strong in their battles. However, even with the support of her community, the whispers continued to haunt her. Each night, they crept into her dreams, threatening to pull her back into the abyss. One night, as Ijeoma lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling of dread. The air was heavy, and the familiar whispers began to fill the room again. "You're still mine, Ijeoma. You can't escape your fate." With a determined heart, Ijeoma sat up, focusing on the warm light she had found within herself. "No," she shouted into the darkness. "You have no hold over me. I am not your puppet." As she spoke, the whispers morphed into a chilling laugh that echoed around her. "You think your words can save you? I will return, and next time, I will take you with me." That night, sleep eluded Ijeoma as she battled against the voices, but with every shout of defiance, she felt her resolve hardening. She would not let the darkness claim her again. Several weeks later, while helping Uzoamaka organize an outreach event, Ijeoma received an unexpected visitor. A woman approached her after the meeting, her eyes glinting with a knowing look. "I am Uzoamaka, a friend of your stepmother Adaora," she introduced herself, her voice smooth and persuasive. "I have come to talk to you about your journey. I think you might be interested in what I have to say." Ijeoma stiffened at the mention of her stepmother, still haunted by memories of that darkness. "What do you want?" she asked, trying to keep her tone steady. Uzoamaka smiled, but there was a darkness behind her eyes. "I know you have been struggling. Your stepmother has a unique power that runs deep in your bloodline. You could harness it, control it. Imagine the strength you could have." "No," Ijeoma replied firmly, shaking her head. "I want nothing to do with that darkness. It almost destroyed me." Uzoamaka leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But it is part of you, Ijeoma. Denying it only gives it more power. Join me and we can be unstoppable." Ijeoma felt a wave of unease wash over her. "I said no," she snapped, her resolve strengthened by her past. "I will not embrace that evil." Uzoamaka straightened, her expression shifting from persuasion to fury. "You think you're so strong, but you don't understand the depths of this power. You will regret this." As Uzoamaka turned to leave, Ijeoma felt an icy chill seep into her bones, a reminder of the darkness that was always lurking. She shivered, the sense of foreboding growing stronger. After the encounter with Uzoamaka, Ijeoma felt an urgent need to prepare herself for whatever was to come. She turned to Pastor Nkem for guidance, sharing her experience with him. "That woman is dangerous," Pastor Nkem warned. "She is trying to manipulate you into embracing the darkness within. We must pray for your protection and strength." They organized a prayer vigil at the church, inviting the entire community to join in their fight against the impending darkness. As the day of the vigil approached, Ijeoma worked alongside Uzoamaka, promoting the event and gathering supplies. However, every step felt heavy with the weight of the threat that loomed just beyond the horizon. The whispers grew louder, and each night she felt more exhausted as they gnawed at her resolve. On the night of the vigil, the church was filled with people, their prayers echoing through the walls, creating an atmosphere of warmth and light. As Ijeoma sat at the front, she could feel the support of her community lifting her spirit. Pastor Nkem led the prayers, his voice resonating with power as he called upon divine protection for Ijeoma. In the name of Jesus, we stand united against the forces of darkness. Ijeoma is safe in the light. As the night wore on, the air became charged with energy. The lights flickered, and Ijeoma felt a shiver run down her spine. The shadows seemed to creep closer, lurking at the edges of her vision. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped, and the whispers turned into piercing screams. "You think your prayers will protect you?" The voice echoed through the church, making everyone freeze in fear. Out of the shadows, a figure emerged, Uzoamaka, her eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "You're all fools to think you can save her," she sneered, her voice filled with dark power. "I will take her back into the darkness." Ijeoma stood, heart racing, determination flooding her veins. "No, you will not take me." As the crowd gasped in shock, Uzoamaka advanced, her presence exuding a terrifying energy that sent chills down Ijeoma's spine. "You cannot fight what is already inside you, Ijeoma. I will set it free." Pastor Nkem stepped forward, a firm expression on his face. "You will not touch her. In the name of Jesus, I command you to leave this place." The air crackled with energy as Uzoamaka laughed, her form twisting with dark power. "You think your words can save her? I will awaken the power within her, and then we will see who is stronger." The lights flickered violently as Uzoamaka raised her hands, summoning shadows from the corners of the church. Ijeoma felt the weight of those shadows pressing against her with an oppressive force. "Ijeoma, embrace it!" Uzoamaka shouted, her voice echoing with sinister intent. "Join me, and we will become unstoppable." "No!" Ijeoma cried out, her heart pounding. She closed her eyes, focusing on the light within her. "I am not afraid." With a surge of strength, she reached deep inside herself, igniting the light that had been her shield against darkness. "In the name of Jesus, I claim my freedom." As the light poured from Ijeoma, it clashed violently with the darkness that Uzoamaka wielded. The church shook, walls vibrating as the two forces collided. Pastor Nkem continued to pray, his voice rising above the chaos, urging everyone to join in. "Pray, claim the light," he shouted, rallying the community around Ijeoma. The room filled with the sound of united voices, echoing a powerful declaration against the shadows. Ijeoma opened her eyes, seeing the determination in her friends' faces. Their faith bolstered her, giving her the strength to fight back. "I will not let you win," Ijeoma shouted, her voice ringing with defiance. "You will not take me." With one final push, Ijeoma unleashed a brilliant wave of light that surged forward, engulfing Uzoamaka in its brilliance. The shadows recoiled, screaming as the light tore through the darkness. Uzoamaka's form twisted and writhed, her face contorted in rage. "You cannot do this," she screamed, but the power of the light continued to grow, overwhelming her. As the light expanded, it shattered the shadows, scattering them like dust. Ijeoma felt the darkness inside her falter, its hold slipping away as she embraced the power of the light. "I am free," she proclaimed, the words ringing with truth. The church fell silent as the light enveloped Uzoamaka completely. With a final scream, she disintegrated into nothingness, leaving behind only a faint whisper. "You will regret this." As the echoes faded, Ijeoma collapsed to her knees, the weight of the battle leaving her breathless. The community gathered around her, a mix of awe and relief washing over them. "You did it, Ijeoma," Uzoamaka exclaimed, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You fought against the darkness and won." Pastor Nkem knelt beside her, pride shining in his eyes. You showed incredible strength and faith. You have defeated the darkness. But remember, vigilance is key. It will always seek to return. Ijeoma nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude for her community. I couldn't have done it without all of you. Thank you for believing in me. The night ended with a renewed sense of hope. Ijeoma's heart was filled with a warm light, a sense of victory blossoming within her. She had faced her fears, confronted the darkness, and emerged stronger than ever. But she also knew that the battle against the shadows was ongoing. As the community began to disperse, Ijeoma and her friends lingered outside the church. The night sky twinkled with stars, and a sense of peace settled over them. Do you think it's really over? Uzoamaka asked, her brow furrowed with concern. I hope so, Ijeoma replied, glancing up at the stars. But I think we need to be prepared. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that darkness doesn't give up easily. I'll stand by you no matter what, Uzoamaka promised, squeezing Ijeoma's hand. We'll face it together. Chinwe joined them, wrapping her arms around Ijeoma. You are so brave, my daughter. I'm proud of you. Remember, you are never alone in this fight. We will protect each other. With the support of her family and friends, Ijeoma felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but with faith and unity, they could overcome any darkness that threatened to invade their lives. Thanks for watching from the beginning of this story down to the end. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel to stay updated with our latest releases. We truly appreciate your love and support so far. See you in our next release. Bye.